Sirianni said he's focused about controlling what he can control. I got to get some thoughts off James Jones before I open it up to you, the brilliant Joy Taylor, and Dave Hellman. I think Sirianni will inevitably be on the hot seat throughout the course of this season. Now, we may not say it right now in July, but the question Jeffrey Lurie, the question you Eagles fans should have for Nick Sirianni is this. What are you sure that he does well? Not what do you think he does well, not what do you hope he does well, not what do you expect him to do well. What are you sure that he does well? You talk about Andy Reid. I am sure he can dial up an offense. You talk about Kyle Shanahan. I am sure he can get the most out of his quarterbacks, from Robert Griffin to Matt Schaub to Matt Ryan to Jimmy Garoppolo to Brock Purdy. You talk about Sean McVay. I am sure that he will have a masterful offense. You talk about Mike Tomlin. I am sure that he can lead men. But what are you sure that Nick Sirianni can do well? And until you answer that question, I believe he will be on the hot seat. I'm not sure that Nick Sirianni can hire incredibly well, because after he lost Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, his following hires were not at all qualified. He's on his third defensive coordinator in 2 years. He's on his third offensive coordinator in 3 years. So I am not sure that he can hire incredibly well. I'm not sure he can call a great offense, because he doesn't necessarily call the offense. I'm not sure he can call a great defense, because he doesn't call the defense. I'm not sure that he can lead a group of men, because the team was disgruntled last year. So I'm not sure of what Nick Sirianni can do. I think he can do a lot really well. I think he can galvanize a group, because he galvanized a group to the Super Bowl, albeit it was probably the best or second best roster in the National Football League, but he still galvanized a group of men to the Super Bowl. But what are you sure that Nick Sirianni can do? And James, for me, until I can answer that question unequivocally beyond the shadow of a doubt, I do think Sirianni will likely be on the hot seat, because the other top coaches in football, they can hang their hat on something. Yeah. Sean McDermott will hang his hat on defense. Jim Harbaugh will hang his hat on, he will have a phenomenal running game, whether Stanford, whether Michigan, whether the San Francisco 49ers, he will run the football. I'm sure Shanahan gonna have a quarterback. I'm sure, but with Nick Sirianni, I got some doubts. So I don't think he should necessarily be on the hot seat, but knowing Philadelphia Eagles coaches, what they did with Andy Reid after 5 NFC Championship appearances and firing him after 1 bad season, Doug Peterson leads the Eagles to the first Super Bowl win. They fire him after 3 seasons. Really, they parted ways. I know he likely will be on the hot seat, but what do you think? Should Sirianni be on the hot seat?
What do we want out of head coaches? What do we want them to do?
Get the most out of their players.
What you want them to do?
I knew where that was going.
Win, right? My man, 34-17, he ain't never missed the playoffs. We talk about these great coaches because we had a conversation last year during the season. Should this be Mike Tomlin's last year in Pittsburgh?
That was silly.
17 years without a losing season. We talk so bad about Mike McCarthy. 12 wins, 12 wins, 12 wins. What do we want out of head coaches? Because the other head coaches that we talk truly, truly highly about, and I'll start with Kyle Shanahan. He wins and he gets to the Super Bowl. What has he done that Nick Sirianni has not done?
Been consistently
larger sample size.
Since Nick Sirianni's been a head coach, he's been in the playoffs every single time and to a Super Bowl in 3 years. So there's really nothing that Kyle Shanahan does better than him, neither. And you can say, what I'm saying, you can say call the game, but as a coach, it's about winning. And the staff that he put together, 2 of those dudes is head coaches, Acho. Doing really well.
I can't even let you do that. I can't even let the sentence continue with you comparing Nick Sirianni to Kyle Shanahan.
I want to know your why.
For several reasons. Number one, Kyle Shanahan calls his offense, and he can replace his offensive minds when they leave. Number 2, Kyle Shanahan did the same thing. Robert Saleh goes to become a head coach of the Jets. DeMeco Ryans goes to become a head coach. Has a number 3 defense in football, and it's still like, you know what, you're not good enough. So you can't even speak of those two in the same breath.
But with all that being said, what has he accomplished different than Nick Sirianni? And we're saying Nick Sirianni should be on the hot seat.
Because I'm not just, you're making the same mistake that we made last year with the Eagles. I don't know if I made it, but the aspect of, you're just looking at the outcome. What's the process? I hated James when, again, you can stumble into the right answer. And I'm not saying he stumbled into the right answer, but track with the analogy for me. There's a reason your teachers always ask you to show your work. Because if you can't show your work, I can't guarantee you can do it again. And because Nick Sirianni could not show his work, hey, how'd the Eagles get to the Super Bowl that year? Oh, you had one of the greatest defenses ever as it pertains to getting sacks. Can you do it again? No, you can't. Shanahan can show you his work. Going back to 08-09 with Matt Schaub, going to Robert Griffin in 2011, and this isn't a Shanahan block.
Yeah.
But my point is, Tomlin can show you his work. McVay can show you his work. Reed can show you his work. Harbaugh can show you his work. Sirianni cannot show you his work.
So really quick, Nick Sirianni got the job in Philadelphia. Were they a good football team when he got the job? They was 4-something.
They were a chaotic football team.
And they were 4-something record-wise.
Coming off a really, really bad season.
Yeah.
Really, really bad season. And my man's first year, he goes to the playoffs.
Yeah.
The second year, he goes to the Super Bowl.
That happened.
And two of the coaches that you saying you don't know if he can hire are head coaches right now doing a really good job. Last year, worst year possible coaching by Nick Sirianni and all this type stuff. Worst year for Jalen Hurts. Worst year for people calling the plays. 11 wins and to the playoffs. And we're talking about a man should be fired or not fired, on the hot seat. I don't know what you want out of coaches. Like, what? So you basically telling me Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat if he has a losing season or it doesn't look the right way, and you're bringing in a coach to do what? Get to the playoffs? Because it's not saying all these great coaches we talk about ain't just winning Super Bowls.
True.
You understand what I'm saying? So, like, you getting rid of really good coaches to get somebody else, and you think they just finna go to the Super Bowl? He been there for 3 years. Ain't never had a losing season. To the playoffs every year. To the Super Bowl. Beat your coach to go to the Super Bowl. So with these coaches on the hot seat, I don't know what you want. Tomlin was on the hot seat, 17 years, no losing season. Coach Mike on the hot seat, 12 wins, 12 wins, 12 wins. Now Nick Sirianni on the hot seat? That's crazy to me.
I do think there's a difference, though, and that's the key for Nick Sirianni, and that's why I think he should be. And kind of what you said, Acho, it doesn't really matter what I think should happen. He's the head coach in Philadelphia.
They always on the hot seat.
We're talking about one of the most football-crazy markets in the entire NFL. You said it. You realize I think there's 7 active coaches with a Super Bowl. Philly's chased off 2 of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, Andy hadn't won when he was in Philly, but an incredibly successful coach. Doug delivered the only Super Bowl in city history. They both got run off when the results didn't meet up to the standard. So how can we say Nick Sirianni won't be? And I'll go back to my original point. It's not about getting to the playoffs or getting to the Super Bowl. It's about the way last season ended. Because that's not just disappointing. To go from 10-1 to 11-6 and just getting shown the door in the wild card round by a Bucs team that had been mediocre all year, Bucs team that snuck into the playoffs by winning a bad division, it got really bad in Philadelphia. The play wasn't good. The vibes were terrible. I'm not in that locker room. I don't know what happened, but it was so obvious that the confidence of the team, the satisfaction, the happiness, the vibes that go along with being a good football team were gone by the end of that year. So it's not about winning a certain amount of games or getting to a certain round of the playoffs. But if that doesn't get fixed, then yes, he will be on the hot seat, and it'll be justified. Because, James, it's the same thing Acho just said. It's about consistency. Yes, Nick Sirianni built a Super Bowl team and a really impressive coaching staff. But when those guys go, how do you replace it? Kyle Shanahan has been amazing at reloading. You didn't even bring up Mike McDaniel.
And he got the same thing that Nick Sirianni has. That's all I'm saying.
I disagree.
I
disagree.
No, you guys are giving credit just because they call the plays. That doesn't mean nothing. My man hired the people that called the plays.
I know they haven't been coaching for the same amount of time, but don't write off the fact that Kyle Shanahan got his team to an entirely different Super Bowl.
Why are we talking about Kyle Shanahan?
James brought him up.
It's true.
Okay, like Kyle Shanahan, I think, is in a different category than Nick Sirianni. He's been doing this for longer. He has more consistency at the highest level. They both have the same amount of Super Bowls to show for it. But in the past 3 years,
Super Bowl wins?
Super Bowls?
Not appearances, no.
Does one of them have a Super Bowl that I missed?
You're talking Super Bowl wins.
Yes. Did either of them win a Super Bowl? The answer is no. They both have the same amount of Super Bowl wins, which is 0.
Getting to 2 Super Bowls
is greater than getting
I'm not comparing Kyle Shanahan to Nick Sirianni.
All right.
I don't even think that needs to be in the conversation. Let's compare Nick Sirianni to Stefanski, or McDaniel, or Dable, or McDermott, or Saleh, or Zach Taylor.
They ain't on the hot seat.
How many of them have Super Bowls?
None.
Have they went to the playoffs every single year since they've been there?
No.
Did they have Super Bowl appearances?
No.
Only one of them does, Zach Taylor. Are we talking about them in the hot seat? Look, Nick Sirianni, What? Who? Some of them are.
Yeah, I'm like some of them.
Zach Taylor's in the hot seat?
I think Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor's not in the hot seat.
I don't think
we're not doing a topic today about Zach Taylor being in the hot seat.
No, he's not famous.
What do you mean he's not famous?
I don't think people could pick Zach Taylor out of a lineup. But I don't want to distract anyone.
Nick Sirianni has made the playoffs all 3 seasons. They have the 5th best record in the NFL since he started coaching, and they won the division. They lost in the Super Bowl, where they played well, right? And then had a down season the year after the Super Bowl, which, statistically speaking, is very common. Very common. It's actually a complete outlier to do better than you did. The only one team has done it since the turn of the century. It's the Patriots. They had a pretty good quarterback there. His name's Tom Brady, legendary coach, and Bill Belichick. Nobody else can say that. It's called a Super Bowl hangover for a reason. If he gets to the playoffs again, that's not good enough. My question is, like, what do you actually want?